Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited today to have the Catskill Dream Team and Dale Stewart of the Hudson Valley here to talk to us about the second home market in upstate New York. So if you both want to take a chance and introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you work, we'll go from there. Peggy, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Peggy Bellar, and I'm one of the co-owners of the Catskill Dream Team. Our office is in Margaretville, New York, and we're very close to one of the big ski centers, Bel Air Ski Center. So it's been traditionally a very popular destination for second homeowners, vacation homes, but with the pandemic, a lot has changed, and we've seen who is coming here change as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm Dale Stewart. I work as part of the Stewart Mathis team with my partner, Samantha Mathis. And we cover the Hudson Valley from Putnam to Delaware County and part of the Catskills.
This is like in that 2 to 3 hour drive.
Same. Our Hudson office is about 2 hours to the city. We're opening a Rhinebeck office, which will make us 1 hour and 45 to the city.
Nice.
And we cover within 3 hours driving range, within about 120 miles.
So Dale, for those of the listeners and for us who don't know which towns are in your counties, can you just rattle off a few names that we might recognize?
So for Dutchess County, that would be Rhinebeck, Red Hook, Tivoli, Clinton Corners, Stottsburg, getting into Ulster County across the river. That would cover Woodstock, Saugerties, down to Carhonkson, and then going back across to Columbia County, Hudson, Chatham, Ghent, Livingston, Germantown, which is having a super hot moment, Kinderhook, which is also having a crazy moment. And then across to Greene County, the Catskill, Cairo, Athens, which I say Athens. It just getting into Delaware and getting into Sullivan, it's on a customer or by customer basis.
So you mentioned a few neighborhoods, or sorry, not neighborhoods, that would be in Brooklyn, a few towns that are having a hot moment. Can both of you in general just kind of speak to broadly what the market looks like right now, especially post-pandemic, and if your market has continued to be second home buyers or if it's shifted to primary residence?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about it. In our market, until 2019, we really only saw people coming up for second homes, vacation homes, weekend places. And the people that were looking for full-time were people that were local professionals that might be moving from one village to another village. And that shifted very dramatically during the pandemic. It was the first time that I've ever had young people coming up from Brooklyn asking about the schools, asking, where are the public schools? Where can I get information about them? Bovina, which is a very popular kind of Tony community, opened a Montessori school. And before the school was completely finished with its build out, it had a waiting list. Wow. So it's been dramatically different. And I think that is going to remain. It's interesting. I went to a listing appointment with a guy who was working in financial services in the city. And he told me that his company had really encouraged people, to come back to the office, and saying that if you're going to restaurants and movies, it's time to come home and come back to the office. But by and large, I think that people have found they're going to do the blended work thing. That genie has left the bottle.
Yeah.
People enjoy it. And whether it's a matter of they're spending, full-time up here and working remotely completely, or spending 4 or 5 days up here as opposed to 2 days a week here. Or in some cases, some of them come for 3 weeks and go back for a week. But there are blended work things that are changing the dynamic of who is here, what's happening here. There's people I sold to several years ago, as weekend homes that have started opening businesses here too. Small businesses. It's been a really boon to our economy and to the services that are being provided. So for us, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So it sounds like the locals are okay with this change, because I know that, I mean, that sounds like a lot of change that's happened quickly.
It's a tremendous change. And in our area, you have to understand that, they're very small communities. The village where my office is has a population year round of 600 people, small communities that would expand dramatically over the weekends. So there's been this long and rich history of people coming from the city on the weekends and returning home. So it's not like it's completely different. But what has been different, and I think the part that's been, the little adjustment for everyone, is more infrastructure things. It's the first time people actually have to look twice when they get to the one flashing light in town. They find that the parking lot is full at the grocery store. And I think the biggest complaint has been mostly services like contractors and builders, because boy, they are really, really booked and staying busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dale, what about you in the Hudson Valley? What have you been seeing?
It's funny, for the past few years, 2019, using that as a good demarcation line, I started to see more Brooklyn buyers that had flexible schedules that were maybe going to be Thursday to Sunday people. And then as we hit the pandemic, we've seen people that, again, like Peggy said, are looking for schools. Which of course we can't help you with, but they started looking for schools. And now what I'm seeing our market kind of shift to is people being open to seeing how it goes and transitioning their lives here at some point. But a lot of my current buyers are looking to transition. They are working from home, but they maybe have a place in the city, or they maybe have a place in Princeton, or they have a place somewhere, and they're looking to get to the Hudson Valley, which is one of the hottest markets in the country. And they want to be a part of it. And like Peggy said, I'm amazed to see who's opening up shops. I have psychoanalysts and someone who makes this yummy tasting lipstick that you're not supposed to eat, but it's really good, looking for storefronts. And that was never a thing. It was a thing where I would beg my clients, like, please, if you come here and you open your shop, I will be there every day with all of my friends.
Yeah.
And now it's something where I have people saying, like, well, I can't get a space on Warren Street, which is the high street in Hudson, or there's nothing available to rent anywhere as a storefront. So just to see the dynamic change from weekenders who had zero involvement to full-time, part-time, or semi-full-time residents who have full involvement, focused on like whether Airbnb can exist or not exist, and a whole lot of like, why are the roads this way? Like asking a whole world of new questions.
Peggy and Dale, for anybody who's watching this and they're like, sold, I want to get a home outside of the city, where do they start, and what is the process like?
Well, the first thing that people should do, and it's something that's basic requirement, is get your, financials in order. Apply for your pre-qualification letter, have your proof of funds in place, and find an agent to work with, because it's really difficult right now in terms of inventory. We have kind of a historic low. So the smart thing is, have your financials in place, find an agent, and be prepared to move quickly. Preparedness is really, really key at the moment. It always is, but it couldn't be more important now.
Agree. I think it's something where people have to temper their enthusiasm to just start and really get their financials in order. If they're buying with a partner or a spouse, to have a conversation and not one in the backseat of our car, like to really understand what the other person wants and what they feel comfortable if this is a transitional second home that will become a full-time or stay as a second home, to understand what that means and how to begin to normalize taking $2,500 a month out of your world and putting it into a house that you occasionally see.
Mhm.
The other thing is, besides the financials, is to really discuss how an offer works. Because I noticed, because we're moving so fast, it is almost like you have to shorthand all of the steps to someone. And it's difficult for everyone to feel comfortable and confident moving forward when there are going to be multiple offers on a property. And when I just this weekend had a very long conversation with 3 buyers and said, we have to pivot. We cannot go after new houses on the market. You're not winning bidding wars because you don't feel comfortable going above, and then you'll feel that you could have normalized that number after the barn doors open.
Mhm.
And so I think it's something that when you start to look, you get your financials in order, you hire a real estate agent, you work with one real estate agent, being comfortable with moving fast, like Peggy said, and being comfortable with work, with looking at a house. I mean, again, I've had somebody come to Jesus's in the past couple of weeks that looking at a house that's been listed for 45 days, where there should be room on the price, where you're not going to have the competition, where you're going to have to live with some really ugly bathrooms. And you can spend that time daydreaming and really figuring out what your house is going to be and how it's going to be yours. And the money that you can basically, hopefully, bank on not going for the hot listing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And doing a bathroom. I guarantee you, doing a bathroom, unless you do all clay tiles and paint it in gold, is going to be less expensive than going for the hot house.
You know, Dale, you brought up something that made me think too. Another really important factor is people have no idea when they hear the Catskills or they hear Hudson Valley, they don't necessarily know the villages and the communities. And in many cases, they have absolutely no idea how far flung they are. I literally have had people send me, you know, a list of properties they would like to see. And when you map it out, it's like a 4-hour drive for the day, like from one part of, you know, from Oneonta to Kerhonkson or something. It's crazy. So learning about the communities is very helpful too, for many reasons. Geographically, to figure out if that fits into your plan. You know, are you going to be going back and forth? Can you get there in your allotted time that you want? But also just the flavor of the communities. They're very different. You know, it's like anywhere else. They have differences, and one's going to appeal to someone and another one's going to have a more farm vibe that's quiet and what someone else wants. On our website, we actually list the communities that we serve, and we have a little write-up about them. We show pictures of the stores and, you know, an introduction to it, a flavor of what it feels like in these various places. And I think that's something that's really important to look into while you're starting that initial search too.
Yeah, Peggy, that pivots nicely into the next question I was going to ask you. And Nigel has probably heard me reference this a million times by now, but there was a very funny New York Times piece called I Thought I Wanted a Country House, but I Was Mistaken. And basically, you know, as she says, I thought I wanted a house, but what I really wanted was a vacation. And now I have to winterize it. And now who's going to plow my lawn and or my driveway, and the roof's leaking after the snowstorm, and all these things that come into having a second home in somewhere like upstate New York, where you do have big winters and a mud season in the Catskills. And so how do you help your buyers think through what the process of owning a second home is like, and things they need to think about in terms of winter, summer, just general maintenance that you're not going to have for a co-op in
That
Brooklyn?
is such a great question, because when people come here, you know, they think, I want to be in something that's completely different than my day in, day out existence in my brownstone in Brooklyn or my suburban home in Montclair, New Jersey. I want something that says country. I don't want it to look like it. I don't want it to feel like it. And the one thing that we hear all the time is, I don't want to see another house. I don't want to hear a car. And that is very appealing, you know, when you're going out for an Airbnb for a weekend with your husband and you've left the kids behind and you don't hear the car and you don't see anyone and life is grand. But it's not for everyone necessarily when they are making a transition for a second property. Some people do love it. And that, you know, for that person, that works great. But I always encourage people when they say, I don't want to see, I don't want to hear, think about that moment when you have forgotten the milk. Do you want to get in your car and drive 20 minutes to get to the grocery store? Or could you find that compromise between villages and have the 7-minute ride in to get here or there? One thing that shifted very dramatically in the pandemic, and I think it's just a matter of people coming up and spending more time here, is that the village houses started selling. In the past, when people would come here, they always thought they wanted I call it the cabin on 5 acres. And the cabin on 5 acres over the pandemic was the sweet spot that dialed up so high in terms of pricing. It had always been what people looked for. And it grew and expanded in the price range, elevated more than any other segment of the market. It's always been the popular one. But people started looking at village houses, and they were getting great deals. And they found out they had these charming Victorians, and they still had these small little towns that felt very Norman Rockwell-esque, and they could actually get outside and walk to a restaurant on the main street. So that shifted in our area in a big way, which had not happened, pre-pandemic. So I always encourage people to think through that reality of, do you really want to be completely isolated, or might it feel nice to have that rustic experience, but still have a few neighbors and maybe a community pool or something?
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what you said, Peggy, I call it the 15-minute milk test.
Yes. Where I am, it's 20, but
we're a little less rural. But for us, it's a 15-minute milk test. If you and it turns into a 20-minute like oat milk.
Yeah.
Depends on your type of dairy or non-dairy.
Yeah, depending on your non-dairy. But it really is like talking. I have a list of things with Samantha that we share prior to closing, and it's what services you need to set up. Your plow guy becomes your lawn guy. Your oil guy, is your best friend in the winter, and when to get a tune-up. I have a whole list of like when to get a tune-up on your furnace, when to start buying winter oil, what month to do that. And it's all sorts of things you'd never think about. I mean, I still forget. I give the list to everybody and I don't follow it myself. But it's how to get services and how to get contractors. And now, how to get contractors has become the holy grail. It's something where we really have to look at everything as a season. You have mud season a little bit more than we do, but it's still something that if someone wants to start construction in the spring, their excavation equipment will be buried in 6 feet of mud if they start too soon. So it's really explaining how our world is different than anything in the 212, 718 world.
Yeah, the seasonal thing is huge. It's very interesting because the other thing that's happened that's been very dramatic is how much land has sold here. I think a lot of people had this fatigue with losing out on houses and the fantasy and idea of being able to actually create something that was designed to your specs. And also with the advent of so many amazing new contemporary modulars that, are very high style, very high design. I think a lot of people are considering building. And it's fascinating to me how many calls I'm still getting for land right now. And I'm always telling people it's an interesting time to look at land because, you can visually see things that maybe you can't, and like how you might be able to open up views, but you can't perform a perk test right now. The ground is frozen. So unless that's already happened, I would never recommend buying a parcel without having the perk contingency, which means you might be dragging a deal out until the spring when the thaw happens. Surveyors will not survey in the winter. When there's snow on the ground, it's just impossible and dangerous, and they won't do it. So you can't get a survey done. And it's really, in some cases, difficult to access certain parcels. And the hiking around is an adventure. I've done it with plenty of hardy folks, but you have to be up for it and have the right clothes and the right boots and everything else. But it's fascinating to me how many people are still calling me up right now about land.
Peggy, what is a perk test?
A perk test is a test where they check the ground to see if they are going to be able to install a septic system. Up here, unless you are right in a village where you're attached to the main sewer lines, everyone is going to have a septic system. And basically, I will take a complicated process and make it simple. They dig a hole, they fill it with water, they see how quickly the water leaches out into the ground, and they make a determination based on that and the slope of the land and a bunch of stuff as to if they will be able to install a septic system.
Dale, I have a question for you that you touched on briefly, that if you can get, because I know that one of the things people think about with a second home is what's my opportunity to rent this property out, or they think a lot about being able to afford it by also Airbnb-ing it or renting it during a high season month. It didn't Red Hook ban Airbnb, or?
It's in the process. And I won't be super soapboxy about it, but we can't levy such high taxes and then tell someone who owns their home what they can do with it.
And is this only in Red Hook right now, or are there other Hudson Valley towns?
Hudson totally changed how they're allowing Airbnb.
Woodstock has a lot of regulations.
Woodstock as well, yes. And these things change, and I have a lot of people that I have to say, like, today you can Airbnb it.
Yeah, I would imagine that that can really significantly impact someone's ability to afford a second home or do really what they'd want with that property.
In our area, it has not really hit as hard. We still have quite easy access for people to do Airbnbs. A couple of the communities have thought about instituting very reasonable demands, meaning they would come do fire inspections and they would request one parking space for every bedroom that is being rented, which works out pretty well, except for in the villages. It can be tough with some of the village houses. But the only places that we're really seeing restrictions so far in my service area are in a few of the homeowners associations have put restrictions down. I recently put a big multi-million-dollar house into contract, and it was interesting. About, I would say 60% of the people that saw it in those first few days were all a little put off by the fact they could not do short-term rentals. And I had several investment groups call me about it. That's been another very, very interesting thing that has happened in the past couple of years, is the increase of investment groups that are coming here to buy really primo properties for nothing but Airbnb. In the past, it was very, very common that I had second homeowners ask about Airbnb and want to do it. But it's the first time that I've sold to numerous investment groups buying specifically and only for Airbnb, VRBO, whatever.
So how does the average person who wants a second home in the Catskills or Hudson Valley, like, what do we tell, ourselves? I know, a lot of people who live in New Jersey, are now thinking about, should I buy something down the shore versus should I go up to the Catskills? How do you get yourself in a position where you can compete with these investment companies or with all the, there's the droves of people who are looking, what do you say? What do they need to have money wise and time wise in order to actually get one of these houses?
I would say time wise, to be prepared to wait it out and sit it out a little bit. Our traditional listing season tends to be the spring. I have never truly figured out why, because it is our mud season and kind of a tough one, but it's traditionally when inventory opens up a little bit. Right now it's super tight. So you are going to be in a major competition for every single property that comes on the market. What I also really encourage people to do is when you're working with your agent, have them figure out what is important to the sellers. It's such a seller's market. And, you can pretty much rest assured every property will be in a multiple offer situation. And it's amazing what can be important to one seller and not another. For example, over the summer, I had many of my sellers negotiating to hold on to their houses through the summer. So the winning person, maybe they paid the same, maybe they paid a little less, but they were willing to say, we won't close until the end of September, and they were putting a contract together in June, for example.
Mhm.
Or up here, we also run into a situation very often where you have houses full of furniture, big houses because it's a different market. And then you move and these sellers have really no use for the furniture, to be honest. So depending on what works for the person, that can be another lever that's helpful. But basically finding out the aspects of the deal that are important to a seller can help you get your buyers to have an advantage in a super competitive market. Price is always going to be there, but there's other things that can be important to them too.
Mhm. What percentage over asking are you seeing these multiple bids get to? Is the winning offer, 20% over asking? Is there a kind of a rhythm that you're seeing to that?
There was a little bit for a while, and now I don't. And it also depended on the segment of the market. We have a very segmented market here, where I was saying that cabin on 5 acres, traditionally pre-pandemic, we were selling them like a one that needed renovation would be $225. You could get a very nice one ready to move in at $325. Now these routinely have started the terrible ones at $325, and the beautiful one will sell for $575, $585. So that, that market changed very dramatically. When we get up to sort of the luxury market, which traditionally in the past year had been 900,000 and above, in Delaware County, I can speak to, between 2001 and 2019, we never had more than one sale above $900,000, above $1 million. In some years, we had 0. This is a big county that includes Cooperstown. Come 2020, we had 11. The volume dialed up dramatically in that segment. The price did not jump up as high as it did for this one segment where things doubled. So it really depends on which part of the market you're looking at. That high end dialed up, but not as much. That, cabin on 5 acres, you better expect to pay above the asking price.
Right.
Something interesting to note that I don't hear people talking about as much is that the Hudson Valley and Catskills have historically been so undervalued that the fact that you could have bought a house that is, I would say, 1,500 square feet, 3 acres, move-in ready, but needs updates for $250,000 when the actual replacement cost of that house was probably $500,000. So we've been depressed price-wise for a number of years, even though our area recovered faster after the 2009 decline than like the Hamptons or any other second home area. So when you look at the fact that those prices, those were a gift.
Yeah.
And the prices that we see now, I don't see them as crazy. I see them as where we probably should have been all along. And it's difficult for people who haven't been here before and are now starting their search, and they look and they see a house sold for X in, $400,000 in 2015, and now they want $900,000 for it. That is a little bit of a market climb that every market gets on a yearly basis. And that's reality coming home to roost, that house never should have been $400,000. If the seller were to burn it down and rebuild, the replacement cost was probably similar to what we're asking.
Yeah.
So just that our prices were low, which is what kind of got the pioneers here. And with that, they were just low for no reason, in my opinion. Like, they always should have been a lot higher.
I think it's also, it's been just the nature of a rural market. We, despite the proximity to a metropolitan area, we're very, very rural. So when you have a smaller population with smaller opportunities for local full-time professionals, that is in part what had the prices depressed for a long time, I think. And to see this adjustment, it's interesting. And I think that it's not going to I don't see it taking a dramatic backslide. I think we may start to see some leveling is kind of my prediction, at least on certain segments of our market, but I do not see it going back to these pre-2020 prices.
Peggy, in terms of the people that are buying in the rural parts, like outside of town, is land a big component? Like, are they really looking for a lot of land? Because I know I always say buying land is kind of like, or having acreage is kind of like eating potato chips or French fries. You start out only wanting a few, and then, 2 acres seems really small, and you want more and more and more. Are you finding that people are wanting lots of land with the home, or?
The land thing is fascinating to me. I think if you went and asked your average person, even up here, but certainly if you went on the street and asked the average person in Brooklyn, what does an acre look like? They would be confounded, have absolutely zero idea of what 1 acre looks like. So people will call me up and say, I want a lot of land, like if I can have 3 acres, and that is very small. Like for when I look for village houses, I put my cutoff at 1.5 acres. They typically run 0.25 to 0.75, but some of the ones that are on the outskirts may have 1.5 acres. And the 5 to 10 acre is a very common build site here. And then when you get much beyond 10 acres, you start getting into a little bit larger acreage, and it becomes kind of a mystery to people. Frankly, most people, even if they buy a property that has 10 acres on it or 6 acres, very seldom go beyond about a 2 acre periphery around their house. That's typically what most people will get out to enjoy recreationally, to plant a garden, to put up a volleyball court, whatever you want to do outside. So it's an interesting thing. I think acreage, there's a lot to be said for it in terms of an investment, because you can't build land. And if you buy a house with a little extra land, it is always, from an investment standpoint, I think basically a positive. But what I find is confusion about acreage. Not that people come in with a clear-cut idea about it, but I find a lot of confusion about it.
How are the taxes up there?
Where we are, very inexpensive. We have a couple of communities where it might be slightly higher for various reasons. And people are like, oh, the taxes in Roxbury seem high. And I'm like, compared to what? The taxes are very, very reasonable. And we have a very unusual thing here in that when a house is sold, it is not reassessed. If you do a major renovation on your house, you are not reassessed. They reassess when they reassess the entire village. It's how it operates here. And typically your town tax assessor also either teaches at the public school or works at the bank or has another job. And it does not happen very often. I've owned my house since 2001, and I think we have been reassessed twice.
Totally different here.
I'm sure.
On an $800,000 house in Hudson, I would let people know to expect about $1,000 a month in taxes.
$1,000 a month. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and that's looking at, you're in a municipality, there are sidewalks. I always say to people, when there's a sidewalk, there's money that goes into the infrastructure. Are you plowed by the county? Are you plowed by the city? So you can see where our tax dollars go. When you get into the more rural areas where you can see starlights instead of streetlights, the taxes go down. Going back to the point about talking about acreage, sometimes, again, you're totally right, Peggy, no one has an idea what an acre is.
The football field. I just want to say someone in Brooklyn knows what an acre is.
Although, a realtor pop test, right? Like how many square feet? Did we all have that on our exam?
Yes, we did. We did.
Although
have it on
looking at me,
exam.
I don't know what the size of a football field. So
it's an acre. Look at that.
Just learn that. That's good. But there's a way of getting privacy, like backing up to state land, of which we have a lot, backing up to someone's acreage where there are
a huge parcel.
Exactly. So there's a way around getting an acre to look like 2 football fields or 5 football fields. It's just a matter of figuring that out. Something that I think we should brush on, if we have a second, is what, like, proximity. Again, we went back to the milk test, but like, if you're buying land, and you're set way back, you have to do the infrastructure for all of that. Not only is there a septic and a well involved, but you have to have a driveway system, and then you're bearing your electric from the road, if that's what you're doing. So I'm a huge proponent of finding a tear down that has the infrastructure, and then improving it, that has the land and has the things. Because looking at just a beautiful vacant piece of land, it's always so much more, and gonna, in this climate, take so much more time to get a builder and to get an excavator at this moment to do any of that, to just find something that has something that you have no attachment to, that you're okay removing.
Yeah. You said it was interesting about backing up to state land. We have a lot of city-owned land, as I was talking about with the watershed, and boy, those are really premium properties. When someone has a property that's surrounded by city land, people love it, because that's called forever wildland, meaning that no one can develop on it. You get the benefit of being able to use it recreationally, walk on it, enjoy it, never have anyone build in your view, and you don't pay the taxes on it. So it's a very popular situation if you can find properties like that. On the flip side, the fact that New York City owns so much land here, we're never going to see the kind of development where I am that you will see in Hudson, for example. We will never have a Starbucks on the main street of Margaretville. It's just not going to happen, and in part that is just because of infrastructure and development and regulations by how much land the city owns. So it's great for some people, and for other people, that's not their cup of tea.
Yeah.
Or coffee.
Or coffee, or Starbucks coffee, exactly.
Well, this was hugely helpful and informative. Are there any questions we missed asking?
I'm just going to point out one thing for a new buyer to look at, that I think we all touched on a little bit, is to look at the houses that have been listed for longer, and to look at the houses, like the way to strategize and the way to win, which, like, you end up with a mortgage usually, but the way to get a home and be settled in this market is to not look at the hot house. It's to look at the house that others have overlooked, that has been sitting for 45 days, 90 days, 120 days, and not have that terrible old adage of, well, something must be wrong with it. A house can hit, a great house or a super decent house can hit at the same time that an amazing house hits, in the same price range, and they just reach too high in price, and they're getting schooled on that. And then that amazing house is gone, and that, okay, moderately good house that can be amazing is sitting there, and then it sits there, and it's like gaining weight. Weight begets weight. Time on the market can add to time on the market, because everyone has so much information at their fingertips that they think that they're wizards that know way more than we do. And the reality of it is that house could be absolutely amazing. It has carpeting put in wood. It has, an 80s kitchen. Either lean into it or change it. But one of the smarter things to do is to not get into a house and renovate anyway. It's to get into a house, live in it, see where you want the new bathroom to be, see if you do want a new window in that bedroom. But you don't know that unless you spend a substantial amount of sunrises and sunsets somewhere.
Good
advice.
Yeah, that is. Well, thank you both for your time, and we'll include your information at the end of this video, so that those who are interested in exploring your areas can reach out. And thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you. It was great.